Alright, hi guys. Sorry for the delay. It's kind of hectic getting back from exam weeks, but, got to deal with makeup exams and lectures this week. Might be a little spotty, but hopefully we'll be fine. If you've not taken your exam, let me know. I know a number of people haven't taken the exam. I can be flexible, but don't expect me to be willing to bend over backwards if you wait, a week or two to tell me, hey, I didn't take the exam. Here's why. You must do both the ID portion and the essay portion. Get both in and do it quickly. If you need help, let me know, but do it now. So what we're going to do today is talk about the origins of the First World War. We're kind of going to step back from our U.S. history course, and we're going to do just some world history. We're currently, today going through the centenary of the First World War. These events took place 100 years ago, and believe it or not, shape in part the modern world in which we all live. So, these are really crucial events, and they're defining moments for the United States as well, because it's the First World War that will, really, if the Spanish-American War and the Philippine-American War make the United States a world power, it's the world wars that transform the United States from a world power to a superpower. What we're also going to notice is we'll try to cover as much stuff as we can. I was a little optimistic with your ID list, probably. But now in these survey courses, it's what we like to call the mad rush to just cram as much in before the end of the course. So, generally I like to get to the onset of the Vietnam War. Sometimes we get, Nixon. Sometimes I usually only get to putting a man on the moon. We'll see. But we'll see as far as we can get. If you've got questions, let me know. And as always, stay on top of the videos. We're getting that crunch time. I'll be putting out a video here soon, the next day or two, about, writing your term paper, about sources, stuff like that. That's going to be due in a very few weeks. So, now's the part where, oh crap, I actually have to do stuff for this course. Please, please, please remember that. So, all that aside, when we look at, the First World War, which is 1914 to 1918, this lecture is only going to go through 1917. We're going to talk about the causes of the war, how the war is fought. We're going to talk about what's going on in the United States, and we'll get the United States involved in the war. And then we'll pick up again in the next lecture with the United States actually fighting the war. If we want to look at some of the causes of the First World War, two of the big things we need to look at are the arms races and the problems of empire. Specifically, these two go hand in hand. If we look, remember that age of empire, that question you had to answer. If you look on this map, where's my mouse pointer? Here we go. You've got the United States here in light blue. Well, you also see us with the Philippines. All this stuff in pink is British. This stuff in blue is French. This stuff in red, Italian. This stuff in purple, that's all of Russia. What we're going to see is, this is the era when nations carved up the other. This map's kind of misleading because although China is shown as one nation, if you remember the maps from, the last few lectures, okay, we had carved up China, or at least Europe had, and we had kind of helped along with that, trying to get some of the assets. So you have this age of imperialism. So you've got everybody like this, if you will. We're all butting heads. We're scrambling for Africa. You've got France over here. You've got Britain over here, Italy over here, Belgium over here, Germany over here, Portugal over here, and everybody is worried about the threatening of the balance of power. Now we take that, and by the way, if you look how far flung some of this is, you've got here the Dutch East Indies, the United States and the Philippines, Britain and Australia, Germany and Papua New Guinea. We're literally carving up the world. And apparently to hell with the native peoples. Nobody, unfortunately, cares about them. Now you take that, and now you have the arms race, such as the launching of HMS Dreadnought in 1906, the world's first all-big gun battleship. And why this is important is, if we remember Alfred Thayer Mahan, Influence of Sea Power Upon History, that for a nation to be great, it has to have a sizable navy and be able to project its power across the world. Battleships were how you did that. That's why we send the Maine to Havana Harbor. But most battleships of the era did about 14 to 18 nautical miles an hour. Okay, their main armament was typically 4 10 to 12-inch guns. But HMS Dreadnought used radical turbine engines. It's now got a speed of 21 knots, a main armament of 10 12-inch guns with 8 firing on either broadside. What that meant is this thing was faster than any other battleship. It could hunt down and kill any other battleship, but it also could, has the firepower of any 2 battleships combined. Overnight, every navy is obsolete. We have just spent, remember, from, say, 1887 to now 1906, building the 3rd largest navy in the world, and it's all obsolete overnight. Now you set off an arms race because everybody's like, I gotta have that. We all have to have some of that. So now we have a rapid acquisition of military technology, and that's going to lead to problems. We also now have an era, beyond that, of new modern weapons, such as the quick-firing artillery piece. This, a German 77mm Feldkanone 96 from World War I. We now have new machine guns that have replaced the Gatling guns. Now we have man-portable. Well, here the really light man-portable, Maxim MG0815s, or here the MG08s that would take 2 or 3 guys to service. You can move these all over a battlefield. They spit out hundreds of rounds a minute. You now have smokeless magazine rifles, repeating rifles in the hands of everybody. Black powder is gone. You have all of this new weaponry. But the problem with imperialism is you have no experience fighting it. Understand, if you are the Belgians and you're fighting in the Congo, there we go. You're fighting in the Congo. Okay, well, it's great that you have, 1889 Mausers, but your enemy has spears, maybe muskets. Your tactics don't have to undergo a revolution. Or if you're France, fighting the Amazons of Dahomey, okay, really ruthless, well-trained female fighters. There's actually a book, if you're interested, Amazons of Black Sparta. These were just fantastic fighters. But they can't do anything against, French Lebel smokeless rifles. Or, Rudyard Kipling, writing about India and Africa, would say, in his famous poem, for we have the Maxim gun, and they have not. Okay, if you have machine guns, spears, bows and arrows, muskets, none of it matters. So imperialism, people forgot what war was like. People forgot what a total war was like. Remember way back to that War of 1812 stuff, months ago, okay? 1812 in Europe, the Napoleonic Wars. Not since Napoleon surrendered at Waterloo had Europe fought a total war. They forget what war is like. War becomes something that, is romanticized. It's loved. When World War I breaks out, they think it's going to be a great party. Men, if you wanted to date a woman, you had to go to war to prove your masculinity, to prove your manhood. Ladies, you would not dare, date a man who hadn't been to war because, what kind of man is he? He has not proved himself on the battlefield. So if we look at 1914, what happens is you have a situation where people don't know what war is like, they romanticize war, and, to quote the late, great Will Rogers, you can't say that human society doesn't advance because in every new war they find a new way to kill you. We have all of this weapons and no experience using it. So what they did to try to prevent war, okay, and I'm going to click through the slides here briefly if my laptop is being really, really slow. It's, tempting me with installing Windows 10, which I don't know. It's Windows. It's going to break something. I know it. If we look here, what we're going to see is the brilliant idea was to create an alliance system. Choose up sides so there could never be a major war. So you have here in baby poop brown. I'm sorry, that's what it looks like. It's baby shit brown. You have the Central Powers. You have Austria-Hungary, which, if you notice, it's this huge conglomerate of all of these ethnic nationalities. You have Germany and you have Italy. But surrounding them, you have the Triple Entente of France, of Russia, and eventually the United Kingdom. And the thought was any war would be so bad that nobody would ever go to war. But people are stupid. On June the 28th, 1914, this guy, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's in Sarajevo, in Serbia, because the Austro-Hungarians claimed dominion over Serbia. He's there for a goodwill tour. He's the Archduke. He's the heir to the throne. And he's assassinated by 17-year-old Gavrilo Princip. He's assassinated because he's a reformer. The movement that assassinated him was called the Black Hand. And, they knew that if this guy got into power, their demands, their reason for existing would cease because he would meet all their demands for reform. Understand, it's kind of backward play, but as the old saying goes, once the revolution is achieved, what use are revolutionaries? Once all the Black Hand wants is obtained, why do you need the Black Hand? So they shoot him. They shoot him to prevent change. So Austria-Hungary gets really, really pissed off. And they issue 20 demands to Serbia saying, look, we want this guy arrested, we want this, we want a special commission, blah, blah, blah. And finally, we want you to give up your national sovereignty. Serbia says yes to everything but that. Austria-Hungary gets pissed. So on July the 28th, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. And now, I've got it in the slides, so I'm going to stay here. But, if you need to write this down, it is critically important. Because remember, we live in a world where it's, NATO and the UN. We live in a world of entangled alliances. Not this bad, but here's how bad it gets. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. But Serbia has a secret alliance with Russia. So Russia, in the spirit of pan-Slavism, uniting all the Slavic powers, declares war on Austria-Hungary. Well, Germany has an alliance with Austria-Hungary. So Germany, tries to forestall the war, but they don't stop Austria-Hungary from declaring war on Serbia. So Germany declares war on Russia. Well, France has an alliance with Russia. So France, in response, declares war on Germany. Britain has a secret alliance with France and is so desperate to get involved in the war. Okay, to invade France, Germany will have to invade here, neutral Belgium. The United Kingdom, this is 1914, digs up a treaty from 1830, where they promise to guarantee Belgian neutrality. And they declare war. By August the 4th, 1914, all of the major nations of the world are at war, with the exception of Italy, if that can be considered a major nation, details, who basically says, screw this, we're done, and drops out of the Central Powers. But what we see is very briefly, because this guy is assassinated, the world goes to war. Now, the United States, we want to stay neutral. We're like, hey, if Europe wants to blow itself to hell, that's on your own head, be it. But the thing is, we want to trade with everybody. But the thing is, this is modern war. Blockades are how you win. This is modern total war. When I say total war, we talked about it briefly with the Civil War. But total war is the idea that you make war against civilians as well, because consider this: if you want, enemy government, okay, to surrender, if you kill off its citizens, theoretically its citizens get tired of the war, they protest, think Vietnam, or they stage a revolution, take over the government, sue for peace. Think Russia, World War I, stay tuned. Total war also means that you mobilize the entire economy, that everybody has to participate in the war. Think, war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan. Okay, it sucks. We all know somebody who's been. But only, less than 10,000 people of the United States have been killed in, 14 years, okay? The war doesn't affect your average everyday life. Oh, sure, there's I support the troops ribbons. Sure, there's, all this stuff for vets. Sure, we all fly the American flag. But your job is not directly affected. Okay, you yourself don't have to have ration cards. You don't have to give up your food, give up your clothes, your tires, your car, your conveniences to fund this giant, never-ending war effort. But in World War I, that, to an extent, will happen. It happened much more so in World War II. But total war is the thought where all of society is mobilized into the conflict. I have no idea what this is, but Europa! I don't know, that's my Mussolini impression. Stay tuned, we'll do that, with the rise of fascism. Now, the war will stalemate by December. Again, people forget what war is like. People have no concept fighting modern weapons. If you've ever heard the term pantalon rouge, red pants, you're going to see, French troops in 1914 charging machine guns like this, charging these, new artillery pieces that are smokeless, rapid firing, ranges of up to 10 miles, well behind the lines. They're dressed like Napoleonic soldiers. They're wearing bright blue tunics. They have bright red pants. And quite literally, German machine gunners would just sit and wait for them and just pop, 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 pop. Remember, we learned in 1898, blue clashes with the dense jungle. The British learn in the 1880s, red clashes in the deserts of Africa. But the French never learned that blue and red together make a god-awful easy target for German machine gunners. And so what we're going to see, the world has no idea. So it's stalemates. And what happens is they had been trained, classically you find the flanking maneuver. If, okay, here's the enemy line, you attack them over here. Okay, if they're coming up this way, if this is the front, this is your front, you swing down and you attack them in the flank. You turn the flank and they run. But if you look on this map and follow my mouse pointer, what happens is they resort to what's called trench warfare. And they dig a line of trenches from Switzerland all the way across France, through Belgium to the North Sea. Where do you flank? You can't flank neutral Switzerland. You can't flank into the right sea, or the North Sea. So what we see is trench warfare will characterize, this will characterize, the war of the First World War on the Western Front. What we're going to see, trench warfare is costly. If we see, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are going to die. If you watch any World War I movie, the thing is they have to make the trenches so big you can get the cameras through. If you were to take those trenches and have the width of them, that would be about how wide a trench is. These are very claustrophobic. They're dirty. They're damp. They're disease-ridden. Many times, many soldiers would write of sharing trenches with rats. And you don't kill them because one will take its place. There's nothing you can do. You can't flank. So we get all sorts of new technology to try to alleviate the problem. You get the rise of armored warfare, the tank, new bombers. Remember, planes, the first powered flight is at Langley Field, it's Kitty Hawk, in Virginia, 1903, 1914, you've got some aircraft with limited range, speed maybe 70 miles an hour. You can't put a machine gun on it. You can pistols or rifles. By the end of the war, German bombers will be able to bomb London. Allied bombers will be able to bomb targets in, the frontiers of Germany. And most hideously, we get the rise of chemical warfare. Things like phosgene, in this case, where what happens, you literally die. What happened? Yeah, you literally die. You literally, your lungs start secreting a fluid, and you literally cough and gag, and you choke on your own, and this is chlorine as well. You choke, you drown on a clear day because your lungs just seep this fluid. And like you see here in this case, these guys here can't do anything to save this guy. He's lost his gas mask. He cannot put on what would be called a small box respirator. He's screwed. You would have, imagine if you will, a gas mask. You put this on, and you would have to fight in this. Or you would get mustard gas, which is a late war, development. And mustard gas would burn you through clothing. It would just literally burn your skin. If your clothing was contaminated, you just burn it. You're never getting it clean again. And the thing is, this was absolutely horrible. But they felt they had to do something. The first time they deployed, they don't even put it in artillery shells. The Germans at the Battle of Ypres in 1915, Ypres, Ypres, what they do is they just open giant containers and hope that the wind blows it across the Allied lines. It does 50% of the time. The other half, it blows back. You ever hear the saying, don't pee into the wind? Don't release chemical weapons into the wind. That's one they had to learn the hard way. The first guys that Canadians were hit. And the only thing they could find to stop it is pee in handkerchiefs and breathe through it because the urine helped to neutralize some of the chlorine. That's all they can do. This is humanity trying to commit suicide. Because we use all this stuff, we're going to get new stuff like the Flammenwerfer, the flamethrower. This tank that just shoots flame, burns people alive. How humane can that be? It's not humane. But this is what, we have to try to overcome. Long, drawn-in trenches. If you have, established sectors are here, you just literally dig a shallow pit and that's it. You would literally share the front line with the dead. And here's the really, really bad thing. You know, we like to think of like World War II, okay? Where June 6, 1944, we land in Normandy. 11 months later, Germany is done. We make a huge advance. In World War I, on the Western Front, the front line typically, moved no more than 30 miles. I don't mean 30-mile advances. I mean literally. We can trace, here's where the front was in, say, 1914. Here's where the front is in every 16 years. Here's where it is in 30 miles. Before the breakout of November 1918, the front line moved roughly 30 miles. To put that in perspective, for those of you that live in Oklahoma, the front line of the Western Front in 4 years, with millions of people dead, did not move half the distance to Oklahoma City from Stillwater. I just drove to Oklahoma City today. It took me an hour and a half to get there. Okay? The front line did not move half that distance in 4 years despite all the people dead. Because all you can do, other than this type of stuff, is just, jump out of the trench, run, hope to God you didn't get hit by a machine gun, try to take the trench and hope you don't get smashed by new artillery, by gas warfare, by bombers, machine guns, all of this new implements of war. Normally I talk about aid to Belgium. I want to skip past this, but I do, want you to at least take from this that anti-German propaganda is, going on ever since 1914. We'll talk about that more next week, our next lecture. I've got some really fun images to show you. If anybody likes dachshunds, I want you to know you're traitors to the United States right now, and I'll show you why. As the old saying goes, I like dogs, but not this breed. Anything that was German was bad. And we see that because of things like Belgium, because Belgium was probably the hardest hit of any nation of the war. Now, the Germans, these aren't Nazis, okay? They let aid in. They try to help. But World War I, we see the rise of propaganda. And probably the best bit of propaganda besides Belgium is now that you have new things such as submarines. Hang on just a second. My computer's being weird. There we go. We have Unterseeboots, submarines, okay? We've had them in warfare since the American Revolution. I mean, there was the Turtle, which detonated a bomb, I think, in Boston Harbor, scared the hell out of the British, okay? We've had these things for a while, but they've not been that successful. But ever since 1900, navies have been rapidly building lots of these things. And the question is, how best do you use them? Well, blockades, much like the War of 1812, that is the mode, that's what Britain and Germany want to do. But historically, with a blockade, what you do is you would sail up to a merchant ship. You'd fire on it, you'd stop it, you'd say, okay, I'm here to, we're going to stop, we're going to search you. If you're carrying contraband, we're going to seize your ship. Or we're going to let you escape and your ship we're going to blow it up. But the thing is, if a merchant ship fired back, you're on a warship. It doesn't matter. But with a submarine, submarines of this day and age are submersible torpedo boats. Okay? They can submerge. They can fire torpedoes, but they have to travel on the surface. They have no armor. You could literally shoot a submarine with a .303, Lee Enfield rifle from World War I, and it will not be able to submerge because the ballast tank will be punctured. So the Germans have to use what's called unrestricted submarine warfare. And with unrestricted submarine warfare, the idea is that they are going to, without warning, in certain exclusion zones, specifically this dark blue area right here, if a ship bearing the flag of Britain or one of its allies sails in here, then a German submarine is just going to torpedo and sink it without warning. That's it. The idea is to keep any goods from going to Britain. Now, some people say this is like piracy. Some people say this is just, hey, this is how modern war is. But the thing is, nobody fully takes it seriously. Warships, yeah. Merchant ships, yeah. But remember, we're only 3 years removed from the Titanic, which, damn you, Rose, you should have held on. Never mind, sorry, bad joke. We're only 3 years removed. Think Downton Abbey. This is still the age of stupid rich people who have, nothing better to do than, I'm going to take a yacht across the Atlantic. I have no idea why Mickey Mouse wants to go across the Atlantic, but hey, whatever. I'd say it's a free country, but there's an exclusion zone around Britain. Speaking of Mickey Mouse, stay tuned when we get to World War II. I'll be not only I'll show you some Mickey Mouse gas masks. Fun for the whole family. So what we're going to see is what about those big liners? And we have the issue of one, namely the Lusitania. And with the Lusitania, the thing is it still wanted to do commercial, the British still want to do commercial voyages. But there's the issue of the exclusion zone. Now the Germans, to prevent loss of life, would put notices like this in newspapers. Notices that said things such as, travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists between Germany and her allies, blah, 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 blah. If we boil it down, it says any ship entering the exclusion zone is liable to be sunk. Now, the British don't believe it. Americans don't believe it. The Lusitania sails anyway. And here in the Irish Sea, May the 7th, 1915, a German submarine, the U-20, fires a single torpedo. It smashes into the Lusitania, which 18 minutes later rolls over and sinks. This should not have happened. Specifically, German torpedoes were so bad on submarines at this era. When you fired a torpedo, there was no guarantee it was going to leave the tube, no guarantee it wouldn't explode halfway to the target, no guarantee it would even explode when it hit the target. The Lusitania is huge. This was a rival of the Titanic. One torpedo should not have sank the thing. It's so bad, and the British were so certain of this, that in sinking inquiries, they told people, don't say one torpedo hit. The more torpedoes you can remember, say 2 or 3 would be good. They literally told them to do that. After the war, British destroyers, used this as a sonar target, the wreck, and depth charged it, trying to destroy it. And it took until divers in the 80s found evidence, and the British government admitted about 5 to 10 years ago that the Lusitania was carrying arms and munitions to Europe. We were selling stuff to Britain. We were putting it on ocean liners, and one German torpedo apparently detonated a bunch of this ammunition and sank the ship. How bad is it? 1,198 civilians dead, including 128 out of 139 Americans aboard. Now, the British were clearly in the wrong, but they're the masters of propaganda. They blame the British. Oh, the British are baby-murdering pirates. World opinion turns against them. The United States, we stop being sympathetic from Germany, and the United States threatens the breaking of diplomatic relations. Now, Kaiser Wilhelm II, he, says, look, hey, this is, we can't risk the United States getting involved. He agrees to end this, but put this in your ID terms. February 1917, the Germans will resume this, and that's what brings the United States into war. I should also mention, since I mentioned Kaiser Wilhelm II, my wife is over here while I'm recording, and she's giving me the evil eye because she's a European historian. I forgot to mention that what makes World War I even saddest is that it's nothing but a ginormous family squabble. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany is the cousin of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and both are the cousins of King George V of Great Britain. This is nothing but a massive cousin squabble. And you thought your in-laws were bad. Here's the thing. At any time they could have stopped this, but they don't. Thousands of people are dying, but they don't. Hundreds of thousands die in these offensives, and they don't. And the war keeps going. So for the United States, in part because of unrestricted warfare, we begin the preparedness movement. We literally create summer camps, such as at Plattsburgh, where people get together and they learn, bad army, stuff. This is really 1916 when the government gets involved. Bad army stuff to try to learn to play soldier, basically. The reason is because, remember, the United States Army is small. At this point, the Navy got more of the good stuff. They don't have a lot of a budget. And so they needed to train people. So if war came and they had to rapidly expand the Army, you would have a cadre of officers. Now, Wilson increases the size of the Army a little bit. He wants preparedness. Guys like Theodore Roosevelt are hardcore advocating for stronger stances against Germany. But the United States does everything but stop short of war. We still believe it's a European problem, that we have no business fighting or getting into this. Now, the preparedness movement's important because it, helps expand the army. But the fact is, the American army is, at this point, fairly pathetic. And I say that not because I'm anti-American. My dissertation is actually on the World War I U.S. Army. But I say it because I want to talk about what the United States does in 1916 with the punitive expedition and what the world does in 1916 with World War I. What we're going to see is, remember, I briefly talked about, with Progressive Era and stuff like that, Mexico undergoing revolution. And you're going to have this guy, Pancho Villa, who hates the United States. And he hates the United States because the United States, we own a lot of stuff in Mexico. Remember, they're still grumpy that we took the top half of the country. We own about 65% of all heavy industry in the country. We, randomly invade Veracruz and seize ports whenever we want to. So Pancho Villa decides to murder some American engineers, working, I believe, for Standard Oil. He then crosses the border and in early 1916 sacks the town of Columbus, New Mexico. In response, the United States Army puts together what it calls the punitive expedition. We get a guy named, I just went blank, John J. Pershing, nicknamed Black Jack, because he made his career serving with African American troops. And we send 4,800 troops, all the United States can muster, to Mexico. We mobilize about 150,000 National Guard troops, but these are so poor trained they're unfit for service in Mexico. Now, this is a complete failure. We rampage through Mexico for 11 months. The Mexican government doesn't let us use the roads, so we have to walk and cart through the mountains. We never catch up with Pancho Villa. This is a complete disaster. We're going to see, which, by the way, here, I remember those trenches. This what counts as a trench for the U.S. Army. That's it. Right here, you're looking at the size, the entirety of the United States Army Air Corps with the 1st Aero Squadron that went to Mexico. And each plane crashed, I think, about 3 times. I mean, this was just a dismal failure. We get some military experience. Pershing becomes the most experienced general officer in the United States Army. That's why he's going to lead the American Expeditionary Forces in France when we do declare war on Germany. But let's take this. We're squabbling with Mexico. We're unable to do that with what the world is doing. We're sending 4,800 troops. It's so bad that, for those of you in Oklahoma, Fort Sill in Lawton, which is the Army's artillery school, has to close because there's no troops to station it, because so many guys are going south of the border. While in Europe, if we look here, just to get an idea, these are some of the main battles, on the Western Front. If we see here, Italy will eventually join the Allied powers, the Entente become the Allied powers, as does Romania, Serbia, and Greece. Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire will join the Central Powers, and the war just keeps on and on and on and on and on. 1916, we're struggling in Mexico. In Europe, what we're going to see are 3 offensives that will cause 4 million casualties. 4 million dead or wounded. We're sending 4,800 troops because that's all we have to spare. In these 3 offensives, 4 million. We see the Germans in France in December, from France to December 1916, launch the Verdun offensive. Now, they don't want Verdun, they don't want to take Verdun, but they know that this is a sacred city. And they know that the French will throw every available soldier they have to keep it. The whole point is just to bleed the French dry. It gets so bad. France, the French army starts to mutiny. Okay, they have to appeal to Britain and Russia for aid. So the Russians launch the Brusilov offensive into Austria-Hungary. And the British respond with the Somme offensive in, Belgium. What we're going to see is the Somme will be so deadly. And just to give an idea, this is all of the shells fired by one 18-pounder artillery piece. All that fired by one gun the first day. 6,000 dead the first day. 60,000 wounded. 6,000 dead the first day. Let's see. To put that in perspective, I'm using my cheat sheet of the phone because, hey, I'm a historian. I'm allowed to be bad with numbers, right? Let's see. U.S. Dead Iraq. Will my internet work? Survey says maybe. Okay, casualties of the Iraq War. Wikipedia. By the way, don't cite Wikipedia for your... okay, 6,717 dead. Wait, what was that? Hang on. I just see something that just broke my head. Okay, let's do this. Let's just do... Oh, hang on. I'm an idiot. Oh, Iraq-Afghanistan wars, 2001 to present. So 14 years. 6,717. 6,717 American soldiers dead. The British lose 700 less. July the 1st, 1916. All that dead one day. All of that dead in one day. Let's see. And by the way, world population, for the record, is much smaller. Okay. The United States, we're staring down the barrel of, at this point, about 140 million people, give or take. You know, Britain is much smaller than what it is. Let's see. Total for. Okay, this was coalition military casualties. That's deaths. How many wounded? June 28. All right, whatever. This is getting away from me. But the point is, you know, 6,717 dead in one day. Or, sorry, 6,717 dead in 14 years. And, you know, that's affected our politics. That's affected every one of us. It's all over our Facebooks. It's a very fabric of our national culture. Remember the protests. Here, with a much smaller population, 6,000 dead in one day of one offensive, of one season, of 1 year. Okay? And there's no massive political ramifications. There's no protest. None of that happens. If we look at Verdun, these are nothing but just piles and piles and piles of human dead. These offensives are catastrophic. 4 million dead and wounded Russians, Germans, Austro-Hungarians, and French. And here's the thing. Verdun doesn't succeed. The Germans lose as many as the French. The Somme doesn't succeed. The British gain, I think, a few miles, and that's it. Brusilov, destroys the Austro-Hungarian army, but kills so many Russians that the next year the Russian Tsar is going to be deposed. No significant changes, really, in terms of, what these offensives were planned to do. So the response was to plan for the next spring offensive. That, well, we didn't do it again this year. We'll do it next year. There's some dissent on the home fronts, but nothing compared to what we see today. Nobody can make a breakthrough. The blockades aren't working. The war is just going on and on and on and on. So out of that, we have the election of 1916, where the Republicans want a major military buildup. We realize, look, at some point this is going to affect us. But Wilson's slogan became, he kept us out of war. War in Europe, peace in America. Now, Wilson will win, but we're going to see only by 600,000 in the popular vote. More and more Americans want some sort of intervention. They want us to get involved as a nation. They want us to take, to examine what's going on in world affairs. So what we're going to see is that, Wilson, bolstered by the fact that, remember, politicians, never mind only 600,000 in the popular vote, I got a mandate. I can do whatever the hell I want. I have no idea who that guy is, but I don't think Donald Trump sounds like a hick, so I don't know who that's going to be. Anyways, if you look, well, it's a mandate. He can do whatever he wants. So what we see with Wilson is, remember, Wilson is an ideologue. Wilson doesn't want to fight. He people are at this point calling World War I the war to end all wars. The fact I say World War I in that sentence is sadly ironic. But the thought is, how can human beings fight like this ever again? Wilson says that the United States is too proud to fight, that we're not going to do this. In December 1916, he tries to orchestrate some sort of peace. He tries to invite representatives over and say, look, why are you doing this? Why are you fighting? But nobody has war aims. Britain is fighting because Germany started the war. Germany's fighting because Britain started the war. Russia's fighting because Austria-Hungary started the war. Also, there's the thing, imagine, I don't know if you guys remember, but what was it, when the Democrats wanted to, what was the smear thing? They wanted to cut and run out of Iraq. And you had the Republicans saying, well, if we cut and run, what happens to all the people that died? Okay. If that's our sentiment after years of warfare for what at the time would have been, say, 5,500, maybe only 5,000, okay, what would the sentiment be like after millions dead? Millions, hundreds of thousands at least. Remember, Britain, for as bad as World War II is, will suffer more casualties in 1918 than the entirety of the Second World War. What we're going to see is in 1918 the numbers are going to spike that significantly. That's how bad it is. Wilson is moralistic. Wilson wants it in the war. Wilson is scared of what this will lead to. And then we start seeing them chipping away. The French army mutinies. How do you get them to fight? You literally shoot about 10% of the whole French army, so the rest will go back to the trenches. The Italians, by now, are fighting around 12 battles of the Isonzo River, where they're using such desperate stuff as trying to make steel-plated armor to deflect machine gun bullets. Doesn't work, but they try it. You get all of this stuff, the carnage, the gas, the chemical warfare, the tanks, the bombing of cities. Then in March 1917, they get the Russian Revolution. The Tsar of Russia is deposed. They're not communists just yet. That happens in October. But it's thought, this is just escalating and escalating and escalating. And nobody can make a breakthrough. But the Germans are perceptive. They realize that they have to do something immediately. So they have to starve Britain. The only way to starve Britain is with unrestricted submarine warfare. So February 1, 1917, they reverse what they decided in 1915. They once again resume unrestricted submarine warfare, and the United States gets angry. Now, something happens that we're not entirely sure if it happened. Evidence says yeah, but it's a little too perfect. The British in 1914, the German cruiser Magdeburg ran aground. And, you now have radios. And the Russians captured this code book from it and passed it to the British, who then set up Room 40, and they were literally listening in to German wireless intercepts. And they intercepted what they called the Zimmermann telegram and sent it to the United States. And the telegram more or less stated that, the German ambassador to Mexico, Artur Zimmermann, was to instruct the Mexican government that if Mexico declared war on the United States and tried to tie down the United States, keep us involved in the Western Hemisphere, that once the Germans won the war, they would ensure the return of the Mexican cession. Texas, New Mexico, Nevada, California, all would be given back to Mexico. Now, Mexico is not in a position to do this. Mexico is struggling with revolution. Mexico has also just had a poorly trained American army rampaging through its nation. But this is enough that Wilson looks at this. He sees this as too much of an insult, that Germany is unwilling to respect the United States being too proud to fight. So he asks for a declaration of war on April the 2nd, 1917. He says that we need to fight to make the world safe for democracy. And on April the 6th, the United States enters the Great War. Now, we'll pick up with the actual war next time, but understand, just a couple of sideshows. This war, it's, for the United States, it's going to be relatively benign, okay? And I say benign in the sense we're not going to see the destruction or devastation that France, that Italy, and that. But understand, World War I will lead directly to the rise of the Nazis. It will lead to the Great Depression. It will lead to the restructuring of Europe. And it will lead to a bunch of consequences that, in some cases, you and I are still dealing with to this day. World War I is often overlooked for World War II, but it's nonetheless really, really important, which is why, we are going to spend, we spent this lecture talking about the origins. We'll spend the next talking about the United States fighting it in the latter 2 years of the war. and then we're going to briefly talk about the orchestration of the piece. So stay tuned. Uploading lectures might be a little spotty, but the slides should be up there now. Please watch the videos. Also, by the end of the week, I'm going to post a documentary that I would like you to watch. I can't make you watch it, obviously, but I can guarantee there'll be, I'll work one of the, essay questions around to it or something. But understand, World War I was also going to send a seismic shift through the problems of race, because African Americans are going to be moving to the north to get jobs. And see, the thing is, it's what we're going to see, the Northerners, maybe not just as racist as the South, but the racism comes out in full force when black people actually move to the South. We're going to start that shift, which will eventually, by World War II, lead to a hardcore push to actually try to secure equal civil rights. So all that, is coming down the pipe. So that documentary will be about the Tulsa race riot, because 1919 to 1921, we're going to see dozens of race riots across the United States, and the worst one was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So stay tuned. We've got all that coming. As always, if you have questions, let me know. Exams, I will grade them as quick as I can, but I'm an idiot and had all my classes, have everything due right now, so I've got around 150 exams to grade. It might take, I hope, if not next week, the week after for sure. But as always, if you have questions, let me know. The next video is going to be talking about writing, some stylistic things, ideas, things we look for, stuff like that. But if you have not already, please, please, please start on your term papers. All right, take it easy. Have a good one. And as always, we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.